Well, good morning to those of you joining us by way of video, or good afternoon or good evening, whenever you are able to be with us. We're glad that you're here. If you were not here with us last week, I'll just tell you, I talked a little bit about hunting last week, or at least one of us in particular who wasn't here last week but is today, and his love for hunting. And he wound up in last week's sermon. I want to talk a little bit about hunting today, but in a different light, although there are some similarities. Yesterday was another one of our people here that gets into the sermon today. Yesterday was someone's birthday, and we celebrate that birthday. And you know, it made me think about birthdays, remembering when I was a kid. And there were a lot of things that, you know, you do at birthday parties that some of us like, some of us don't. You know, parents are trying to do things to, when you're really little, keep you engaged. But one of the things I enjoyed doing was treasure hunts. You ever go on a treasure hunt or a scavenger hunt when you were at a birthday party, your own or somebody else's? You know, and you think about the scavenger hunt, and depending on the age, obviously, it depends on what kind of instructions are given. But there are certain things, regardless of the age of the participants, there are certain requirements you've got to give somebody. First of all, you got to tell them what they're looking for, right? It's a little, yeah, that's hopeful. It's a little pointless to send somebody on a hunt, a treasure hunt, if they don't know what they're looking for. Treasure, yes, but that could be in all kind of things. So they need to know what they're looking for, and you need to give them some guidelines, some directions perhaps, as to where to look. Particularly if you're doing this outside and you're doing it with little kids, they can be looking all day long. And that made me, when I was thinking about this, I just had these visions. I don't know if you do that, but I picture things I remember, you know, and I'm picturing the really little kids, you know, and they're out wandering around, you know, and you can tell we're going to be here for hours. They need some help, you know, and inevitably the mom or the dad will come along, or maybe an older sibling, you know, and kind of guide them toward it. And there's an interesting thing when you're watching that age group. The little kids, the participants, well, they're excited, particularly if they find something like candy when they find something. But sometimes it's not the kid who's most excited. You ever notice that? Sometimes the parents are just as excited or more so when the kid finds something, and they're trying to get them over, and come on, and they find it, and yay, they celebrate, and the little kid's standing there like, okay, what do I do with this? You know? All of that had me thinking about seeking and searching and going on hunts. Now, it's a little different. Last week we were talking about deer hunting, and if you're going to go deer hunting, if you don't know what you're looking for, then you really don't need to be going hunting, right? But if you're hunting for a treasure, regardless of what it is, even if it's not, I've put it in birthday terms, I've put it in young terms, but if it's a treasure of any kind, particularly if it is something of real value, maybe of real meaning, perhaps the treasure hunt has a little bit more significance to the hunter. I want to invite you to consider that idea this morning. Consider what type of hunt we are on, what type of treasure that we're seeking, particularly this time of year as we're celebrating Advent. We talked last week again about Advent and what that means, and it's just another way of saying the arrival or the coming of Jesus. And we celebrate Advent looking backwards at his first coming, but also anticipating his arrival in his second coming. And there is a sense for me, not so much in looking back, of course, it's over, his coming, but there is very much a treasure hunt in the anticipation of his coming again. Let me explain more about that. I invite you to turn in your scripture to Isaiah this morning, the prophet Isaiah, at about middle of the book, middle of the Bible. We're going to look at Isaiah 11 this morning, but I want to give you a little bit of background. It helps to know where we are. And we're not going to go into a deep study of this morning. It's well worth it. Maybe I'll come back to it in another sermon. But today I want to give you just this detail. The setting is the southern kingdom. You may remember that after King David and his son Solomon reigned, the country, the people of Israel, the nation of Israel was split in two. And it resulted in the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. The northern kingdom was known by, it kind of kept the name of the whole. It was known as Israel. The southern kingdom was known as Judah. And the prophet Isaiah was sent as a writing prophet. His word was targeted toward or delivered to the people of Judah, the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom had already experienced God's judgment. The people had really gotten off track. This was not a one-time thing. It was a repeating problem. And those of you that have been studying with us on Wednesday night, 2 Kings, you know how much that is. Chapter after chapter after chapter, we read of kings that did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord. In other words, they got off track. They were not finding the treasure the Lord intended them to. They were on a hunt, but it was a different kind of hunt. And most of the time they were seeking human answers to their problems. They were seeking gods of another kind. They were making idols. They were involved in all sorts of treacherous things instead of hunting for the true treasure that God intended them to find. And God sent prophets to try to get them back on track. And Isaiah was one of those prophets he sent. Again, he sent it to the southern. Isaiah's prophecy was targeted toward the southern kingdom. And a couple of things happened in this period of time. In Israel and Judah's searching elsewhere, other than turning to God, God was trying to bring them back. But the kings didn't always listen. And there was a particular king, Ahaz, of the southern kingdom, that was under threat. Israel, the northern kingdom, Syria, another nearby kingdom, were threatening them. And King Ahaz, instead of turning to the Lord and finding the treasure of God's protection and provision and security, Ahaz looked elsewhere. And in fact, he made an alliance with one of Israel's worst enemies, most violent, cruel enemies, the kingdom of Assyria. He made a pact with them. And Assyria made good on their end of the bargain. They came down and took care of the Syrians and the Israelites. But as any bad king or any king of lust for power will do, he didn't just stop there, because he'd got to know the southern kingdom and said, maybe you have something to offer. I paraphrase, of course. And so Ahaz has gotten the kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom, in all kinds of trouble because of this wrong alliance that he's made. Isaiah is now speaking into that. And in chapter 6 of Isaiah, at the very end, the prophet speaks of what's going to happen to the southern kingdom. Very end of chapter 6, he says, and he's speaking in the cultural language at the time. There were trees all over the place. It was an agricultural community area, and he's talking about that. And he says, although a tenth remains in the land, it will again be laid waste. This is what the Lord is telling them. But as the terebinth and oak leave stumps when they are cut down, so the holy seed will be in the stump, will be the stump in the land. In other words, he's going to see to it that judgment is enacted. And just like in a forest, a whole bunch of the trees are going to be taken down, but a stump will remain. And in one of those stumps, a seed will remain. In other words, a glimmer of hope will remain. The way in which God's going to do this is he's going to actually use that awful kingdom, Assyria. He's going to use them as his own instrument to bring about the punishment on his people in Judah. And you read about that at the end of chapter 7, where he talks about this horrendous kingdom that did not recognize God at all being his instrument. And after God has finished using the Assyrians as his instrument, he's going to turn around and take care of the Assyrians for all their wickedness. At the end of chapter 7, it talks about how all their hills will be, that were once cultivated, will no longer be there. They will become places where cattle are turned loose and where the sheep run wild. In other words, it'll be turned into a wilderness. And all of the good, all of their glorious trees will be taken down. Stumps remain everywhere. Now flip over to 11. And in this passage, the prophet Isaiah is giving them hope. He's giving them hope to say that, yes, all this is going to happen. You deserve this punishment. God's going to bring it about. And then he's going to use the very instrument that he punished you with and take them out. But hold on, those of you who are faithful. Though there may be few, a remnant, if you will, God will be faithful. And this is an incredible promise. It's an incredible forecast. It's an incredible way of God saying, for those of you treasure hunters who have remained faithful to me and have held on to my way and my word, one day the treasure will be yours. Read with me. He says, starting at verse 1, a shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. I want you to listen as I read through verse 9. I want you to listen what God is saying through the prophet Isaiah. What he's saying about this promise. What this treasure is going to look like. This shoot that will come up. Jesse, of course, if you're not thinking that already, Jesse was the father of King David. You know, and they all looked back at how wonderful the kingdom was, the kingdom of David, when it was all one, it was united, and it was supposedly a great kingdom. But Isaiah refers to David's father, Jesse, as if something new is going to happen. And this new branch will bear fruit, good fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. The Spirit of wisdom and of understanding. The Spirit of counsel and of might. The Spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. The Spirit of God was spoken of in the Old Testament. The Spirit of God would come and rest on people whom God was going to use as an instrument of hope, an instrument of good. And the Spirit would rest on them to usually empower them, to give them what they needed to carry out what God was going to do through them. This Spirit, in his resting upon this branch, upon this deliverer, if you will, would bring not only wisdom and understanding and counsel and might or power, but he would also bring the knowledge and fear of the Lord. I want you to hold on to that phrase, because the fear of the Lord is referred to frequently. You'll find it in different places in the Bible. One of the places that I like most is you'll find it in Proverbs 9, chapter 9, verse 10, where it speaks of the fear of the Lord and his understanding. It's an important concept for us to grasp, even though it was used in the Old Testament. For those of us in the period of the church, the period of the New Testament, it's an important phrase to hold on to. Because this branch, this shoot that comes up, this deliverer, this continuance of what was once promised and is good, will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes or decide what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. I would imagine if you're in a position like the southern kingdom and destruction has been prophesied over you, you would, having been through king after king after king after king who had been bad and turned away, and ultimately you had suffered under that, you would welcome the idea of a new ruler, a new judge that doesn't just decide by what he can see. He decides by an internal standard. A standard that doesn't change, a standard that is good. A standard of righteousness and justice, where even the poor benefit, not just the wealthy, who often are responsible for electing leaders, right? even the poor and needy, even the voiceless, even those who don't have any reason to be hopeful, even they will benefit. Down in verse 5 it says, righteousness will be his belt and faithfulness the sash around his waist. And then he paints a picture for us. The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with a goat. The calf and the lion and the yearling together, or the calf and the lion will feed together, just like the cow will feed with a bear. Their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. Now, I don't know what you know about animals, but in case you don't know, lions aren't made to eat straw. Their bodies aren't designed to handle straw. And so this is not just a kingdom of where the obvious enemies, aggressors, and victims, those are the hunters and those prey. It's not just where they come together in peace, which is a profound statement by itself. But they will somehow be changed in a way where they can receive what they can't currently receive. And then the most vivid picture, let your imagination run with this for a minute, see if you can see it in your mind's eye. The infant, the little helpless child, will play near the cobra's den. I talked earlier when I was talking about the birthday parties and how the parents are following the kids around, and they're guiding them and pushing them and encouraging them. Imagine what a parent would do if the mom or dad looked out and realized the child was getting near a snake, let alone a cobra, let alone a cobra's den. Can you grasp the contrast, the almost ridiculous vision of how good things are going to be, that even that could happen without danger? What Isaiah is talking about is a radical rearranging of the way society works. What he's talking about is that in a land where there had been countless rulers who had not helped the people he was responsible for, they were responsible for, but in fact gotten them deeper into trouble, they'd been in more need. The people were searching. They had to be, the poor and needy especially, had to be searching and thinking, will our God ever deliver? Will our God ever come through? Will things ever be right again? And this is a vision given. Verse 9, they will neither harm nor destroy on my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord. There it is again. The knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. In other words, the knowledge of the Lord will be covering all. Isaiah is trying to paint a picture where instead of all these helpless idols, instead of all these foreign kings that really are only in it for themselves, God will deliver to these people, those who have remained faithful, few as they may be. God will one day deliver an entirely different kind of ruler. And that ruler will be so radically different and radically good that even these pictures he's painting will not only be possible, they will in fact be real. It's an entirely new world, if you will. It's an entirely new creation. He's painting a picture of paradise. And that, in fact, is what we celebrate as we wait on the arrival of Jesus. Paradise. But I want to go back to that phrase, the knowledge of the Lord. The knowledge and fear of the Lord. And I want to invite you to turn over to Proverbs. Proverbs 9 verses 10. Don't do it like I did. It's before Isaiah. Proverbs 9:10 reads this way. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. God's not trying to keep this deliverer a secret. He, in fact, is wanting him to be known, and knowledge of him and fear of him, reverence of him, an understanding of his way and an obedience to it will be throughout the land, and there will be good beyond belief. So much so that you can't even imagine it in the terms that he's used. They seem like a movie rather than reality. But if you'll remember where all of this got started, all of this off-track problem that we have started, in the very beginning, when God created Adam and he put him in the garden, there were two trees. There was a tree of life and there was a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You remember? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And as we've talked about before, some of us anyway, we realize that they already knew good. So when Satan is tempting Eve to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because then she would gain something great, she would be like God, they already knew good. It was a lie. It was a deception. She already had what he was promising. Well, not all of it. She didn't have evil. She didn't have the knowledge of evil. She didn't have the experience of evil, nor did Adam. And what happened in this? What happened in this very early scene at the beginning? We bought into a lie, and that lie led us into a world of hurt. A world where leaders, human leaders, are ultimately seduced by the lust for power. And we are searching for those strong leaders to deliver us from the problems we have. It's all over the place. Tell me about a country today, anywhere in the world that you know of, that isn't wanting a leader to lead them in power. We don't have to just talk about this country, although I tend to do that. Look at how we respond to power and leadership. Not at all the image of what Isaiah has painted. Friends, here's the message of this morning. Here's the point that I really want you to take home with you. We continue to be on a treasure hunt. We continue today, and you can put it in different terms, obviously, but we continue today, no matter who you are, to search and sometimes to wonder, will we ever find peace and harmony? Will we ever find unity? Will we ever find good for all? Or have we really given up on that idea? Have we given up on that possibility? Have we in fact turned to the place in our own minds and hearts to where we think, well, that's not possible, so let me at least get a leader who will take care of me and people like me? Have we given up in a land that is so divided now on the idea of real unity that we don't even look anymore? And what do we tell our children and our grandchildren when they listen to us talk and they watch? Do we have anything of real hope to offer them? Now, we as Christians talk about our hope in Jesus, and we talk about the coming kingdom, and we talk about the good ways things will be when he rules on earth. And some of us even go to the point of talking about what it's like now that his Spirit is come and living in us, and what difference we can make, you and I can make, on the community around us with this same Spirit of wisdom and understanding and counsel and might and knowledge and fear of the Lord. What we can do with his Spirit living in us. But I have to confess to you that I am still susceptible, and I think maybe you might be too, of getting way too caught up in all the struggles that are around us and forgetting except when I'm in a religious setting. That this is not just a promise. It's a coming reality. And you and I have a part to play in it. As we wait on Jesus' return, as we wait on the fullness of the kingdom, you and I have an opportunity to make a real difference now by the very things in this vision. What if the poor and needy today, defined however you want to define them, what if the poor and needy in our society, our community, your neighborhood, what if they saw us as a place where they could turn and run to find help in this way? Not that we are the deliverer, but that we can tell them and show them what he's like. What if that was a reality in our neighborhoods? What if we were so convinced of it in ourselves that we didn't mind telling people, even though it might sound a little odd today? In fact, what if we believed it so much so? What if we had so much confidence that God would bring about this vision and make it real, that we began to live according to this and not the pursuits that we're all tempted to pursue? What if they could see in us what we believe? Is it possible that the very Spirit of God, the Spirit that rested upon this shoot up out of a dead stump, what if that very God, that very Spirit could empower you and me to become likewise? What could it mean to those around us? Not in a grand fashion, just one at a time. One at a time in our neighborhoods. What if our house, what if my house in my neighborhood, what if people could see me living in such a way that told them, you're pursuing something different than the rest of us? Why? You don't seem to be in it for yourselves. You seem to be as interested in the needy and the poor. You seem to be as interested in loving other people. You seem to be a person of peace. And you live in the same place we do. You don't seem bothered by, well, bothered, but not caught up in all the stuff that divides us. What is it about you? Could they, in fact, find in you and me directions to a different treasure? A treasure. Could they, in fact, find a whole new kind of treasure hunt? And could we help them discover it? This is a message, if you're sitting there thinking, well, it's a different passage than we talked about previously, and it's a different way of coming about it than we did previously, but this is a message Reed's been preaching for quite a while now. We just keep somehow we keep ending in this same place. Well, I'll just give you my answer for it. God not only continues to point me to places in His Scripture to tell me this is what He desires for us, desperately, but He's also reminded me that even though He has pastors and preachers and churches all over His land, we are as divided and as far from Him as we've ever been. And I wonder He's going to have to give us these kind of messages. And yet at the same time, I'm hopeful because He's not giving up. He's not giving up. Just like He didn't give up in such a horrendous time of apostasy, of disobedience, of rebellion, in the time of Ahaz and the other kings. Even today here, God hasn't given up. And He's inviting you and me to participate in the bringing of a new kingdom. In just a minute, we're going to celebrate communion. But I know those of you joining us by way of video aren't able to do that today. So I want to close us out in prayer, and then we will celebrate communion together. If you are in a place where you could come and be with us sometime, we welcome you. We'd love to celebrate communion with you in person. Let's pray.